Good morning. Welcome to the Internet Seriously, the show where we make sense of the internet industry. Joining us today, we have a guest, James Sutherland, who is the Research and Development Engineer for Oxford Information Labs and the Global Signal Exchange. Hi, welcome to the Internet Seriously. I'm Alice Taylor. I'm a former speech and language therapist and digital policy researcher, and today we're going to be talking a lot about AI. So I'm very interested in getting into the ethics of AI and how, if at all, we can standardize or regulate AI that exists.
Hi, I'm Emily, and as a policy person, I'm always interested in thinking about the impact of AI on society, which we talk about a lot, but we've got James here today, and I want to sort of talk about the use of AI in research and what are the guardrails around the use of AI. How do we know, how do we correct for uncertainty, and also how do we know what's actually going on?
Hi, I'm James. I'm the R&D engineer here at Oxford Information Labs. I'm really interested in seeing how can we use AI to get interesting results, to find information on the data that I'm analysing here, and how can we do that reliably.
Fab. So before we get into our main topic today, do give us a like, a comment or a subscribe, or ask your smart device to play the podcast, The Internet Seriously. You can see the icons appearing now with Emily, who is doing a lovely demonstration. So, James, you're an R&D engineer.
Yeah, that's right.
And AI is a big part of your job, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so what do you do with AI? Do you just kind of ask ChatGPT to give you some help with questions, or is it a bit more complicated than that?
It's a little bit more complicated.
Yeah.
It's about using AI to do the stuff that we wouldn't want to do ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about such a large volume of data that we're looking at on a daily basis here, we don't want to be trying to classify that or giving that scores ourselves, and so that's why we use AI to do that kind of grunt work and to do that base level classification kind of stuff.
So to sort of people who are listening, I think a lot of people are using AI for grunt work. So is what you do any different to like me being like, oh, I need to learn more about this topic, I'm just going to ask Gemini for some answers?
Yeah, I think it's fundamentally it's the same thing, right? We just want AI to save us time and help us with the things we're doing. I think though, because we're doing it professionally here, we're trying to make it as efficient, as reliable as possible, and as useful as possible. And so there's just things that we pick up, like giving the AI a role, for example, which if I was just talking to chat, I probably wouldn't do that. But when we're doing it on a large scale, we want the AI to know, okay, I'm doing like data classification or something like this, rather than creative writing, and then it kind of knows how to specialize its information and its resources, things like that.
I'm really interested in this whole thing of giving chatbots a role, because so ChatGPT 5.1 has just come out or is coming out, and it seems there's now an option, because everyone was saying that ChatGPT 5 was so much less human and so much less kind of affirming, being like, this is the best paragraph I've ever seen written, this is incredible work. And what you can do now is you can sort of select, like, do you want it to be sarcastic? Do you want it to be informative? Do you want it to be entertaining? And do you feel like that's kind of baking in the role element? Why do chatbots like being given a role?
Well, I'm not an expert on this in particular, but I imagine that because something like ChatGPT, it's using information, like masses of information, and it could do so many different things for you. It could do creative writing, it could write a professional essay, something like this. And so I think that when you're asking it something, it needs to know, okay, who am I in giving this answer? Because if you ask, like, I don't know, a comedian to write an academic paper, maybe they'd do a great job. Maybe they'd put a few too many jokes in there. But if you specify to the AI, then they know kind of which resources to utilize the most, I think.
James, I have a couple of questions for you. So often the kind of public discourse around use of AI to do academic work is about cheating. It's like, I can't be bothered to write my essay, so I'm just going to get a chatbot to do it. Tell me and tell our listeners why how AI can actually enhance research in a scholarly way. And the sort of one of the buzzwords in the sort of AI discourse is about describable AI. How do you, when you've got the results that you want, how do you describe what you've done so that maybe others could repeat the results? Because strong methodology ought to be repeatable. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, if you looked at my work computer, you'd see about 1 million tabs with AI open, because I don't want to close any of them just in case we need to show, okay, this is how we did this and that's how we did that, in case we need to document that methodology. I think it's definitely it's something that you want to write down of how did you do this. But it is interesting, I found with AI, you could ask the same thing twice and it just gives different answers entirely. I think it's definitely a growing thing of how do we document this? How do we make sure that people aren't just cheating with AI? And how do we kind of prove that? I'm not too sure, but I think just keep tabs open for now.
But another aspect is, I think often technology makes us think about stuff we took for granted in normal life in a different way, and hold the technology to different standards to people. We've been talking a lot amongst ourselves about how we would normally classify hundreds of millions of data points as humans. First of all, you would get very bored and you would never get through it, so you'd have to do samples. But I know, like, from my background as a lawyer doing litigation and going through things like discovery, where you have thousands of documents and you have to make decisions about, like, do we reveal this? Does privilege apply? Do all of these things apply? Is that your own answers to those questions as a person will vary according to whether you're tired, whether you're bored, whether you're feeling really officious, whether you're feeling kind of relaxed. And actually, a human being, if you ask them the same question multiple times, will usually give you different answers, won't they? So how do we adjust for this? And also, I'm always interested in using tools that do a better job than people. Technology, you should be using it when it does a better job. Can you talk about AI and classification and the sort of approach that we're taking there?
Yeah, it is really interesting, the thing of it could give different answers based on the mood that if it was a human, it would give different answers based on the mood that it's in. I think there's a few things that you can do with AI, like giving it a role to kind of specify this is the lens that you're looking at this through. You're looking at this data as a semantic relevance expert, or whatever you call it. But there's a few other bits, like one of the things with different large language models is the temperature, where you can change the temperature of the AI.
What does that mean?
So temperature, I've been working with Gemini the most at the moment, and so it goes between 0 and 2, and you can have kind of a range between that. And the idea is that with a temperature of 0, it's always very deterministic. It always chooses the most likely next token. If you think of a large language model as just deciding which token, which word comes next, with a temperature of 0, it always chooses the most likely one. And so it's more deterministic, it's more kind of consistent. If you gave it the same prompt 1 billion times, I expect it would give the same answer 1 billion times, kind of thing. Whereas with a higher temperature, it's kind of, you could see as more creative, putting a different spin on things, because it's not necessarily choosing the most probable thing, but it could go in different directions.
I want to ask you a bit more about temperature and talk a bit more about uncertainty in AI. But before we get onto that, it's time for our Tech Room 101.
Room 101.
Alice Taylor, what is your Tech Room 101?
So this week, my Tech Room 101 is AI crochet instructions.
Ooh.
Yeah, so we've got a few pictures of, the things that AI promises to give you when it comes to crochet instructions.
Ooh, can we have a look at them?
Yeah, I think that behind the scenes, the AI crochet
there's a sort of
pictures
scrambling
are just
noise from behind
coming
the
up.
scenes.
Yeah. So we can see.
What
So
is
behind
this?
me, there's a beautiful lady
Oh, that
made
looks really
of crochet.
easy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it looks really easy. She's got kind of like flowers in her hair.
She's got very
really
human
beautiful
eyes as well. I can really
very
imagine that
Yeah,
would be
and there's a
piece of
few
cake.
more. So there's
Ooh.
also like a kind of don't even know how to describe it. Like a creature who's sort of like a half squirrel, half kind
Yeah.
of mermaid. And if you could show the other
And it's
pictures
got
as
6
well.
legs as
Oh, that
well.
was so
So
5 legs.
yeah, you
Oh,
know,
look
like
at the little
really kind of
cowie.
I like
very
the-
AI-ish, but very beautiful.
How do
And
you
then
do
if
the
we
horns?
show a video of
Quite.
expectations versus reality of AI crochet instructions. So we have a video. There we go.
Oh
Okay,
yes,
so-
getting AI to create
Yeah,
knitting
because I
patterns.
was bored.
Love. Okay.
So for anyone who's listening, we start out with a dog and it
Wow.
looks very nice, and then they turn it and it's kind of got the body of like a snake,
dear.
a teddy bear that looks like a sort of corn, a rabbit
They're all
that's
kind of
like
cute.
a teddy with a kind of haunting smiley face. So
So this is a little bit of a gap.
a little bit of a
between-
gap between what we're promised, and
promised.
what it makes, because AI chatbots can't work in units smaller than words, right? And crochet instructions they're quite like code. I'm very interested in the history.
Because you do a lot of crocheting.
Oh
don't
yeah,
you?
I've started
You've got
my
little-
Christmas present crochet
Really?
mission.
Very exciting.
But,
So I've got a whale that you've
yeah,
crocheted.
crochet
for me.
instructions are very like code, and I'm very interested in the overlap in the history between like knitting and sewing and patterns and
also
coding.
the jacquard loom.
Jacquard loom, programmable
and
looms,
programming.
because
Really?
it's coded, the things. It will be like 2 SC LP, and it's like, what does that
What the
mean?
hell
And you
does
get
that
through
mean?
doing lots of crochet, you're like, okay, it means do 2 single crochets into the same loop. And so I think that chatbots don't have enough knowledge of what the letters mean, so they just kind of tell you anything, and
They
they're like
freestyle.
40
Yeah,
loops, and you're like, what even is that? So they're very good at giving an impression of knowing what
Yeah,
they're talking
yeah.
about without knowing what they're talking about, which brings me on to it's sort of our next topic about AI, but it kind of connects to what you were saying, James, about the temperature being 0 to 2. So earlier this year I attended the AI Standards Hub Global Summit, which Oxford Information Labs research was actually instrumental in creating, and it was the first ever global summit on how do we standardize AI. And one of the speakers there was Professor Stefan Hauf, you said how to pronounce his name, who is a professor of uncertainty. And I thought that's such an interesting job. And when he said he was professor of uncertainty, everyone in the room was like, ooh. And he runs, working groups and does papers on machine learning and uncertainty quantification. And James, what do you think about the idea of uncertainty in AI and kind of what we've been talking about, and also how that connects with temperature?
And the knitting patterns.
And the
knitting
knitting pattern. Well,
patterns.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the temperature is an interesting thing to play around with in terms of uncertainty. I've been trying a lot of temperature 0, kind of be super deterministic, decide this is what this is. But it is something I want to research and look into more to increase the temperature and see, how meaningful are these results compared to a temperature of 0. I'm still curious about that.
Yeah, because so James and I have been doing some research which involves, using AI to try. Oh, behind us we can see a crocheted the internet. Seriously,
It's lovely.
maybe we should ask it to make a pattern and see how well it
Yeah,
does.
yeah.
But yeah, James and I have been doing some research into trying to use AI for research. And what I found really interesting about working with James is that he has created a sort of way of looking at our results through lots of different kind of AI lenses. So rather than going, this is our one type of AI analysis, you've kind of had about 4 or 5 different toggles that we can switch on and off. Tell us a little bit more about what you've kind of been doing with that.
Yeah. I mean, we've been working on prompt engineering for a while now, trying to improve it, trying to get the kind of results that we're looking for. And so I figured, okay, instead of just trying one type of prompt, let's actually see, okay, which let's compare the different parameters that you can change. And so one of the toggles you mentioned is the temperature. So we have a temperature of 0, temperature of 1, and you can toggle that on and off and actually see kind of in real time the difference between the results that we got. I ran the prompt like 9 different times in the background, and I've put it so that you can see the exact like the results with those parameters you choose. So we have the temperature. One thing we asked for is to give reasoning, because I found that Gemini will kind of think differently somehow about the results that it's giving, whether it needs to give reasoning or not. When it doesn't give reasoning, it kind of just gives a score, that the output we're looking for. But when we ask for reasoning, it actually gives quite different results. And I'm not sure why.
And
I think
we
it's,
kind of feel like more accurate.
We
results,
feel more accurate,
more
absolutely.
consistent.
I think it's because you're testing it more, and that because often, when you're doing much more trivial work that wouldn't be in an academic environment, you ask a chatbot a question, and then you come back and from your own knowledge that there are some inaccuracies or it hasn't got something quite right. So you test it again. You're like, oh, what about this now? Oh, yes, quite right. Sorry, oops.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're right, yes.
But
Raspberry
I
has
think it does
5
come back
Rs.
to that sort of what we expect of a human, what we expect of a machine.
Yeah.
What we expect of a human is that humans are fallible and they make mistakes.
Right.
Expertise is about like you're more likely to be right than wrong, but you're never going to be completely right. And as we're trying to make machines more human, then maybe that fallibility and that uncertainty is part.
This is really
what
so.
part
This
of
is
Stefan
I've got a paper in front of me, which is actually by Young et al. And it's called Uncertainty Quantification in Machine Learning for Biosignal Applications. So what does that mean? So when I was a speech therapist, we learned all about using like MRIs and EEGs and ECGs for supporting diagnoses, right? And what I find really interesting about these kind of like, to the lay person, a medical scan, an MRI feels so concrete and feels so like, well, the MRI shows there's nothing wrong, so it must be correct. And the reality, as any healthcare professional can tell you, is that they are very subject to, like high signal to noise problems, interference. If the patient is moving a lot, that can make a difference. And also just literally human error. Like humans can confuse left and right. They can get things wrong. Their interpretation of what the machine says can be flawed as well. And so what these scientists were trying to do with their study is quantify uncertainty and get the machine learning models to not just give you an answer, but to say to capture the degree of uncertainty, or to sort of, as James is doing, present you with like 4 or 5 different interpretations and why those are different. And James, what do you think about this idea of quantifying uncertainty?
Sounds like a hard thing to quantify.
Yes. Because I guess to quantify uncertainty, and this was something that really came up at the AI Standards Hub, it's like we can never know what the truth is. And is that kind of measuring distance from the truth, or do you think there's something else going on?
To me, it sounds like uncertainty is the possibility of untruth. Right? It's you could have something that is completely true, but there is uncertainty about it. You're not sure if it's true or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, also, to me, like your work that you've been doing, it's sort of, it's not just about distance from the truth, but almost distance from different answers. Because you can ask Gemini the same question in 2 tabs, and it will give you a completely different response. So, to me, it's really, I feel like your research is great because you are capturing, we've got like 5 different answers, and what we're trying to do is pick the one that's kind of most meaningful to us, and that will give us, the most interesting results. Yeah.
But you can see that also that presents moral hazard as well.
Absolutely.
But any statistical analysis does. The lies, damn lies, and statistics, that's a well-worn phrase that goes back more than 100 years. You can use apparently very objective data to tell a story, and actually we want to tell a story with data. We want to say there's all this stuff, what's it telling us? But you can be very there is a lot of moral hazard in that. So I'm really interested in the way that you're approaching this with, we're getting all of these different views. It's almost like a three-dimensional model that you're creating, whereas from here it's looking like this, from here it's looking slightly different. I'm really intrigued about how we lift it beyond that kind of exploratory, playful approach, and how do we then generate this is what we're saying about it. And it's probably about describing what we did. I was looking at Stefan, you mentioned Stefan Hauf's as research, and in a lovely, very short paper that's also very readable, he's describing the requirements on interpretations tools for AI systems. So he's somebody who's thinking about standardization, and he's also thinking about the interplay between standards and the EU AI Act. So the EU AI Act has got a great big chunk about standards and how those help you satisfy your regulatory burden when you're doing high risk stuff. So he's got a nice recipe book of like, these are, 5 things that are your purposes, and here are another, handful of things that you should be sort of listing out, about 10 different things when you are going through something that is an interpretation tool. Goes for your intended purpose, blah-de-blah-de-blah-de-blah. But I like that kind of, it's really not telling you what the result should be, it's telling you your method of like how these are the requirements that you need to hit.
Yeah, and it is so difficult to not introduce bias as well, because when we're writing a prompt, it's like, oh, I want you to show this kind of thing, but then hang on a sec, I've just totally introduced my own bias into the prompt. But what I find is that sometimes I'll run a prompt and it gives results, and I think, oh, that's absolutely not right. But then I read the reasoning that Gemini gives, and I kind of, my mind is almost changed of, oh, actually I expected this thing to score like this, but the reasoning that Gemini gives, I didn't think of that before. And you know what, actually, I kind of agree with the score that it gives. So it's a tricky thing to nail down.
But is it really interesting hearing you talking about this? It's almost like a relationship with another being of some kind, one that's immensely clever at looking at hundreds of millions of data items and extracting something in a way that a human being couldn't be. But you also have a vital role, because without you doing the prompts and testing and keeping kind of like, are you sure, it's a bit like digging away at something, then there's not, that data is just going to sit there, and the AI is not going to do anything with it. So it is all about the interaction with from the human to the machine, and sort of trying to work out what is doing the best job, what's the best tool for the job.
Absolutely.
We're almost out of time, but before we wrap up, it's time for our guilty pleasure online. So I think it's this week. Emily Taylor, what is your guilty pleasure online?
My guilty pleasure online is James's cousin Tom on TikTok. Well, because he's the
Who is Tom?
He is Great British Bake Off 2025 finalist, isn't he?
Yeah.
Did he come second?
I've actually not seen the final episode.
I watched the final.
Did you?
So someone in the office was like, James got us all to say who's our favourite person on Bake Off. And then right at the end, he was like, oh yeah, Tom. He's my cousin. So you are the cousin of Tom.
I am the cousin of Tom.
What is it like being the cousin of a Bake Off finalist?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah?
I didn't know he could bake, to be honest, until everyone, like the whole family group chat. He sure can. He absolutely can. Yeah, I was totally surprised.
But he's also just a star, isn't he?
Oh, he's fantastic.
He's got such incredible star quality and humour and like quickness, and he's also like, his TikTok is hilarious.
Yeah, so I think we've got a video of him on his TikTok. He just
sends himself up. He's doing lip syncing.
They played at the end of Bake Off.
Did they really?
When they do a kind of like, where are they now? And they had like Jasmine from Bake Off, and they had this and then they had Tom, and they played the clip that we have got, which is from Tom's TikTok.
Yeah, nice.
So if you're listening, what we're looking at is Tom in a full nun costume, lip syncing to The Sound of Music. I want to say on the actual hill.
On the
It
actual
is.
hill.
On the actual
he
hill.
found the right place.
Yeah. He's really getting into the performance.
Yeah,
he's
he's
fantastic.
living it.
I've got to say, he
Yeah.
can really rock the
Oh,
the
he
look.
can. Yeah, he can.
I can't remember what it's called. The nun's
Yeah.
Yeah.
but
outfit.
he's got something really
a magic.
And the other thing, so I went into this huge show and watched every one of his TikToks like a stalker, and then found a whole stream of people who are heartbroken that he didn't win
Really?
and feel he was
I've
cheated.
got to say,
Wow.
but then there was a week where I can't remember. It was like he got salt mixed up with citric
Really?
acid, and it was a
He
bit
made
of
a
a mess.
mess.
Whereas I have to say, Jasmine, the winner, spoilers, Bake Off spoilers, she had like 4 or 5
Yeah,
star
yeah,
bakers in a row, and I think
Well,
you
yeah.
can't really. But to me, he came second. I don't think they really announce who's second and third. They just announce the winner of the top 3.
Right.
And yeah, he absolutely smashed it. So
He did so well.
congratulations
Yeah.
to your family, and I feel all of us
I
here
think we're all
are
a
actually
little bit more
part of
famous
Tom's
because
success.
Absolutely.
I think he couldn't have done it without us, even
I
though
don't think
obviously
he
would.
Bake
Of
Off
course.
was filmed before.
Months ago.
So James, do you think Tom would come on our podcast and maybe
Maybe.
do some baking?
Come to the annual Bake Off in the office. Come
Yes,
on.
Now that
the
would be
annual
fun.
Bake Off.
That
That
would
would
be
be fun.
a really.
But also,
you could judge
do
the
you
bake
think
off.
that
yes.
James's cousin Tom from the Great British Bake Off should appear on the podcast? And what do you think about AI? We've been discussing quantifying uncertainty in AI models. Let us know in the comments, and do give us a like and a comment and subscribe if you're interested in the show. This week we've had James Sutherland. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and looking forward to seeing you next week. Thank you for listening or watching The Internet Seriously.